I'm Stephanie Funk. I'm the manager here at Chadwick's in Grace, Idaho. I'm also the one who does all of the long arm quilting for the store and for the community. So I have a customer's quilt that I'm working on today. Let me show you what I'm working on. So there is this disappearing 9-patch. I love how it goes. It's a gradient from like one color down to the other color. It's got this whole spectrum of colors and every row is slightly different. So this is what I am quilting. I am quilting I'm doing some wishbones in the sashing. I'm doing some swirls. I think of these as like cinnamon roll buns, sticky buns. As I'm stitching those, that's the image that's coming to mind. In these big and small squares, I'm imagining that to be like, my first thought was like a fish with the head and the tail, and so I wanted the tail to kind of curve in, and then I decided to do the same thing on the head, but now this is looking more like a flower. So I think that's just gorgeous. And then I'm doing some switchbacks in these pieces. So let's begin on this next block and I will show you how I'm doing that. So I have my scissors here. I've just finished this block and I pulled my bottom thread up and I'm gonna snip it right there because my next block I am picking up here off of, let's see if you can see this. Up here, let's maybe get you in a little closer. So here, I've done this ribbon candy. And so on my last pass, I stopped here because I've got a 26-inch throat space. So as I'm stitching, I can stitch a whole row here without moving it back and forth. So I had stopped my stitching here, and that's where I'm gonna pick up stitching this ribbon candy in the sashing. Okay. So what I do is I center my needle right over my previous stitch line. I take a stitch, I pull up my bobbin thread, I take another couple of tiny stitches just to lock that stitching in place, and then I'm going to continue working down this sashing. And these ribbon candies, I imagine like Hershey's Kisses stacked on top of each other. I always have to have a vision in my head of what I'm stitching that helps me stitch it a little cleaner. I'm just imagining that where it touches, I come out about halfway, come back in, come back out. And then I'm going to end right here because my seams my seams are here. And so I'm doing continuous stitching down this sashing, and I am breaking thread here between these sashings. So I end on a half a loop here, and then I'll start on a half a loop on this side. So that's where we're going to go next. So I've got to bring up my bobbin. Get my scissors. I've got my, let's see if you can see this, my needle minder on the side of my machine. So I've got a needle here whenever I need to use that, and that's where I usually keep my scissors so that they're always handy. So since I take a couple of really close stitches, that ties my stitching off, and I don't have to bury my threads, because that burying threads is not my idea of fun. So I'm gonna start here in this corner, bring up my bobbin thread again, take a couple of small stitches, secure that in place. I'm going to stitch around this block. I do like to stitch in the ditch. That helps me, it helps the block be secure, so that if I do a motif in here and then go back out and stitch in the ditch, sometimes this line can get kind of wavy. So I like to secure that block first. So I'm going to go all the way around the block. And I always stop stitching, if I remember, just slightly short of the end of my ruler. If I forget, my line may not be straight. And I'm only 5'3", so since I've got such this wide table, I do have my table set a little lower so that I can reach all the way in here. So that I bend up my hips and not trying to really hunch over the machine, trying to keep my back straight. That helps with some of that tension you can get in your back if you're hunched over sewing all day. Okay, so I'm back to my corner. And when I get to corners and I'm gonna stop, I push my stop button just a few stitches before my corner, because my machine seems to always take a couple of stitches after I push the stop. And then again, when I start, I do the same thing. I kind of go a little bit slower at the beginning, let my machine catch up to my hands. So here we go. And again, I'm just imagining some Hershey's Kisses. That's helping me keep my shapes fairly symmetrical. I'm trying not to touch the seam allowance, but if I happen to, I'm not going to get too stressed over it, because that is how I'm moving across where I start and stop. I'm trying to stop in the seam allowance so that when I bury my threads, I don't bury threads. When I tie off, it's in the corner instead of a tie off like in the middle of a seam someplace where it's really noticeable. So now I'm going to come back to this corner. We'll clip this thread too. Then I'm going to come back to this corner. Bring up my thread again. Take a couple of small stitches. Get my straight ruler. I'm going to come down and I'm going to work in this first quadrant of this block. So I want my points to be in the center. So I usually start on the outside of the block, but this first block, the first quadrant in the block, I'm going to stitch in the ditch, down these seams, around the whole thing. Not all of the seams, I'm just highlighting the big and small block. And right here, these seams, if you can see, let's see if I can see this a little better. My seams are not necessarily right on top of each other. The points don't quite match. But I'm going, as I stitch it, I'm gonna like split the difference and kind of go in between. So I come off of this seam a little bit. See if you can see that. I come off the seam a little bit, then I'm off that seam just a little bit. That's about the best I can do when seams don't quite match. Okay, so now I'm in the corner. I'm gonna clip this thread. I really try not to start and stop unless I'm at a starting or stopping point. If I'm on a curve or something, I do not like starting and stopping there because it can make a little jig in my sewing leg. So from out here, I'm going to come to the center. If I was doing a concentric circle from the center of the block, from the outside, I would come to the center and then I would come back out into the center and come back out. And I would do like that shape. And then when I come around, I come back out to the corner. But I'm only doing a quarter of these consecutive circles. So I'm pretending this isn't the center. If I had a big block here, this is my center. So I'm only doing the quarter of that. I'm going out and coming to the center. And then I'm going to come out to like halfway. And then I'm going to come back. Now I'm going to come out to this the corner here, and my previous stitch line, if you can see this a little bit, let me see if I can get you down in here. This previous stitch line, I'm just going to come inside a little bit and head toward that corner. So if you can see that, these two, this leaf and then like this leaf will look like they're kind of stacked on top of each other. And then I will come back down And I'll do the same thing again. I'm going to follow that line just on the inside and come to this side of this block. And I will come back down. And then I'm going to come back out again, but come to that point. Then I'm going to come to the center. And I'm going to come out. And now this, I'm imagining a smaller block, and this is the center. Maybe you can see a little better on, maybe on this side. I come back out, touch the point, the side, come back in, come out, touch the corner, back in, touch the side, back in, and then back to the opposite corner. Okay, so that is how I am stitching these big and small blocks. I will continue doing that. So now I've stitched in this stitch. I'm going to continue up here, get to the corner, then I'm going to come over here, and I've already stitched out here, so I'm just going to start here. So you see how all of these, as I come out, they're just stacked on top of each other. I kind of just move that way. And then, so now I'm gonna stitch in this on the side, down to this corner, and then I'm going to stitch into this corner. I gotta make sure I don't get myself confused. I'm not stitching over here where these two blocks meet in this quadrant. That's where I am. That is the center. So stitch to the corner. I'm gonna come back out. Into the corner. And I'm trying not to pause when I hit the corner and I reverse direction, because if I stay there for too long, I'll get too many. This machine is moving pretty fast, and so if I stay there for even just a minute, or a second, I probably have like 10 stitches, and that really builds up the thread. Okay, so now this one is done, and I stopped stitching over here. My machine stopped before I thought it was going to, so I just took a couple of extra stitches to get me right on that corner. And now I'm going to come down and do this quadrant. So there's my center. So I stitch to the outside, stitch to the center, that side, back to the center, to the corner, that side, and this corner. And then I'm going to stitch up along this seam allowance. And again, I'm going to stitch down to this corner. Now on these smaller blocks, I take my time because I'm like, I gotta make sure that I know where I'm going. These larger blocks, I'm like, oh yeah, I know where I'm going. It's a big straight line. I tend to sew a little faster. So I'm trying to keep my hands moving the same rate on any of the area. Okay, so now there's that one. Now I'm going to come back up to the center. And then I'm going to come and do this last quadrant. Switch to this outside. Come back into the center. To the side. And this is just freehand. I'm not following anything. I'm just looking where I'm going and hoping my hands guide me there. Okay. So now that I've got just this small square in the center here, but I have not stitched here or here yet. So while I'm thinking about it, I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to stitch across, and then I'm going to come back. And I gotta be on the, I can't be on the opposite side. I've gotta be on the same side. Come down, out. Okay. So now I have all of my squares stitched. So now what's left is this border, and they're all connected. So I can move all the way around that block without having to break thread. And if I start here, I'm going to end up over here, which is really close to over here, where I'm going to do the next block. So I'll just do these switchbacks. Maybe a half an inch apart. I'm stitching all the way down until I run into the seam allowance. I'm stitching all the way down this side because my seam is right here. So I'm going to come back here, and then I'm going to switch directions and go this way. I'm letting the seam allowance or the seams dictate where I am stitching. So I'm going to stitch to that corner, and then I'm just going to cross over to this one and do the same thing. There's my seam. So I'm going to switch direction. I'm going to come this way. That one I'm on my opposite side, but I'm just going to travel in that ditch till I get back to the side I want to be on. And I like my stitches to be maybe 10 inches or 10 stitches per inch. So that means my hands are going slow, but the machine is going fast. And that's a rate that I like. For this detail work anyway. If I'm just going to do all over stippling, I'm not really concentrating that much on where I'm stitching. I can stitch much faster, so I turn my machine on. But this is what I call medium dense quilting. So my mild quilting is if I did just some straight line quilting, or if I did just stitch in the ditch. My medium quilting is stitch in the ditch plus a motif in each block. So yes, I'm stitching quite a bit in these blocks, but I'm still considering that one motif. So my dense quilting okay, so I'm just following this line and coming back over here so I can, oh, I didn't get that stitched either. I'm switching directions. So my dense quilting is if I stitch in the ditch, and then say instead of doing the switchbacks, if I did like edge to edge something piecing, and then I came back again and did something in between there. That's going over the same block twice, or the same, well, the first time is the stitch in the ditch. The second time is the motif. If I go over that block for the third time, doing a second motif, that is my dense quilting. Now I'm trying not to touch the edges along here, but I will touch the edges as I'm moving along the block. Then I'm just going to come back up this block, and where I didn't get this seam, I'm just going to stitch that thing closed. And I'm going to double check, make sure I got all of the stitches done. Okay, so now I'm going to tie off this block. Okay, there. You see that block was maybe a harder one to see because it's dark fabric, but I'm hoping that that shows up a little bit. But you can see this one where it's a little lighter fabric. I'm using this teal thread to match the teal back, so it shows up a little bit. It really hides in these darker prints, and when you stand back, you're not really noticing the thread color, but it is stitched, and it's not distracting from the piecing of the project. Now let's bring you around to the back. and I just want to look at the back a little bit. So let's see. There's some of these points right here where all of my points are coming together, and it's not getting really bulky. And here's one, and there's one. It looks like my stitches are good, so I'm happy with how this is turning out so far. So anyway, again, I am Stephanie Funk. I am the manager and the quilter here at Chadwick's, and so I will leave a link to our shop in the description. So our store is chadwicksmerk.com. We would love to finish one of your quilts if you are so inclined to send us a quilt that you need finished. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day. We'll see you next time.